I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Now, that's kind of a paraphrased misquote from Albert Einstein, something he may have said, but not actually a quote. But he certainly wasn't wrong, right? The idea behind that is, from his perspective, having seen the destructive force of the atomic bomb, not knowing the date of World War III, which may be sooner than we'd all like, if not already started, he imagined some pretty gruesome weapons at that point in time, leaving so much destruction that when we finally got around to World War IV, all that'll be left is sticks and stones, right? We'd be back in the Stone Age. Certainly, one said when you look at what we have now, obviously nuclear weapons are incredibly devastating and have only gotten more devastating over time, but also other things, right? When you look at cyber attacks, the possibility for grid down, and studies that have shown that just in the U.S. alone, if the grid went down for a sustained period within a year, 90% of the population would perish, just could not survive without electricity, without the modern conveniences that we've all learned to depend on. Unfortunately, going to the grocery store to get food, turning on the taps to get water, going to the doctor when you're sick, those are all modern conveniences that without electricity, they would go away. So certainly what Einstein said, 1940s, 1950s, still holds true today, right? Don't know what weapons we'll see in World War III. Said perhaps we're seeing that now with everything going on, right? Now, if you look at the Stockholm International Peace Research, there's 13,080 nuclear weapons exist. About 90% are owned between Russia and America. Certainly 13,000 nuclear weapons would do a tremendous amount of damage if they were ever unleashed on the world. Now, there are other countries, many other countries that have nuclear weapons, and you see places like North Korea seems to have quite developed a stockpile very quickly, and China is probably already developing a stockpile as well, so the number 13,000 might even be light, right? And we look at things like hypersonics, the ability to deliver weapons very quickly, multiple times faster than a speeding bullet. We've talked about hypersonics and the speeds those demonstrate. There are capabilities out there that can be quite terrifying. So I want to jump in. As I've been doing in the videos, we're taking bits out of the Nuclear War Survival Skills book, Kress and Kearney. Great book. Once again, highly recommend it. Just taking little bits here and there out of it, trying to rewrite it a little bit. Talking about some of the myths, right? Some of the common myths you might hear about nuclear war, myths really perpetuated by Hollywood, by apocalypse fiction. Certainly the idea, of course, whether intentionally misconstruing or not, is nuclear war would be horrible, right? And even looking at these myths and talking through them, though it may be survivable for many, it would certainly be horrible. And I'm not remotely suggesting it wouldn't be horrible. But we'll jump into some myths here, right? There's, I think, important to at least understand. Not that it would be horrible, not be horrible, but it would be survivable. There's a lot of situations, a lot of things you can do that might improve your odds of surviving if something like that were to happen, right? And it's not necessarily the same preparation that you might have for other disasters. So first one I want to get in and kind of explain what I mean by that. So the myth was in the worst hit parts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where all buildings were demolished, everyone was killed by blast, radiation, or fire. And it's that statement, everyone was killed, is where the myth comes in. Certainly nuclear weapons would be incredibly devastating, but once again, the myth being just everyone dies, right? And that's the myth. So in Nagasaki, people survived inside an air raid shelter, not a nuclear war shelter, because this was the first time nukes had been dropped. Wasn't a nuclear war shelter. They were as close as a third of a mile from ground zero. So I did the math. That's just under 600 yards from the direct impact point of the detonation. They were in large tunnel shelters without blast doors and were deep inside the zone where buildings were destroyed. So in as much as it is destructive, once again, it is survivable, right? In this case, they were in air raid shelters, open tunnel air raid shelters. In addition, small earthen covered family-sized shelters with blast doors survived within 100 yards from ground zero. Now we're going to get in, you're going to think immediately, wait a minute, that was near Hiroshima, Nagasaki, very small nuclear bombs. And I'm going to get into that, so stick with me. We're going to do two myths this time. Now, bomb shelters themselves, unfortunately, uncommon. They seem uncommon in the United States, perhaps not in the rest of the world, right? A lot of places in the world are frantically, I'll use the word frantically, that's my own appraisal of the situation, frantically trying to build different shelters, but in the United States, they seem relatively uncommon. So that leads to the second myth right here, which is what I was alluding to. You're saying, why do you keep talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Certainly that was the only real world example of nuclear weapons going off. So myth number two, some modern H-bombs are 1,000 times as powerful as the bombs used in Hiroshima. Therefore, the destruction would be 1,000 times greater. And the answer is not really, right? Just because it has 1,000 times more explosive force somehow doesn't necessarily mean, and this has to do with splitting the atoms and whatnot, that it would be 1,000 times more destructive, 1,000 times greater. So a nuclear weapon 1,000 times as powerful as the weapon used at Hiroshima under similar conditions would be expected to cover an area about 130 times larger, which is still big. Don't get me wrong. That's a big boom. That's a big explosion, but it's not 1,000 times, right? Bigger. So, for example, an airbursting a 20 kiloton weapon at the optimal height to produce maximum damage would destroy or severely damage buildings out to 1.42 miles. So if it was a 20 kiloton weapon, and the reason the airburst is rather than having it slam into the ground, they wait until it's 20 feet, 40 feet falling down, and then it detonates, and that would be the maximum damage to buildings. Talking 20 kiloton would be 1.42 miles. A 20 megaton, which is now 1,000 times bigger, would have a maximum damage range about 16 miles. So that's just saying the area of maximum damage, sort of ground zero, but you went from 1.42 mile radius to 16 mile radius, not 1.2 to 1,000 mile radius, right? Large, certainly destructive, certainly horrible, but one nuclear weapon is not going to destroy the world. Right now, as I said, there are 10,000 nuclear weapons out there, so it's where I'm trying to get with this is, first of all, the point of the book is about life-saving, nuclear facts, self-help instructions, and it really talks about survival skills, how to survive nuclear war, and part of that is understanding what nuclear war is and also what it's not, right? And as I said, a lot of the movies you see, a lot of things in Hollywood give that sense, and I've talked to people who have the sense that we just all die, right? And the answer is not really, right? So as I said, nuclear shelter is not common in the United States. However, they work, right? If you had one, if you're in an area that had one, old bomb shelter, something like that, they do work. So something to keep in mind, right? Not attainable for everyone. I do not have a nuclear shelter, but if you're in a large city, a lot of buildings are going to have storm shelters, maybe bomb shelters, parking garages, basements. You start getting underground and your survivability goes way up versus someone just standing on the street, right, or standing next to a window, which you would not do. And we did a video kind of talking through the first couple hours, if you happen to be in a city or somewhere where a nuclear weapon goes off, what you'd want to do in those first couple hours. So I did a video on that, may kind of walk through that again. But important to understand is it's not necessarily into the world type situation. Everyone wouldn't just automatically die. So I hope that helps out. I know it's pretty grim, but that seems to be the world we live in now. So as always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.